what do we do in Australia? It has been a hell of a week for our country. And we are experiencing something that I imagine our friends in America must go through a lot. And I don't know how it would be possible to feel numb by having it happen as often as it does over there. Because I think as Australians who we haven't sort of seen this level of gun violence in a very, very long time, probably since Port Arthur, really, where we've seen such a massive loss of life in such a short period of time. And I can only imagine how much worse this would have been did we not have the gun laws that we do have in this country. You know, if these people had assault rifles rather than the bolt actions and the shotguns that they did have, how much worse, it feels weird saying that, how much worse could this have been? Because it's already pretty horrible. It doesn't feel like it could be worse than this, but the sad fact of the matter is it could have. So for anyone living under a rock, or perhaps not in Australia that hasn't heard about this yet, there was a large gathering of Jewish people in Australia celebrating Hanukkah on our very famous Bondi Beach, one of our most infamous places, a very iconic Australian destination. And while these people were celebrating with friends and family in, you know, one of the most picturesque places in our country, two scumbag, dirtbag, dog human beings took a large amount of guns, 6 if we understand it correctly at the moment, and opened fire. And a lot of people are obviously asking why. And unfortunately, and we're going to talk about this a bit later, a lot of people are going to take advantage of this for their own political and religious ideologic reasons, which is gross and disgusting and horrendous. And we'll get to that. But I think what we need to do is focus on the people involved first, the humans behind all of this. Now, I prefer not to go into their names too much, but it's hard to avoid it because all of the articles have come in. And you never want to make the people who perpetrate these horrendous things famous because you don't want to see copycats in the future. So why would two people do this? Now, the logical jump here would be that somehow it's linked to what's been happening in the Middle East. And unfortunately, it is looking, based on some of the reporting, that it may be that way. So you've got many, many articles around the world now referencing that there were these two gunmen, a father and a son of all people, who have now been linked with ISIS. You know, you have the Washington Post, among many international firms now, confirming local reports from police that there was ISIS flags represented on the back of these cars in the home of these people when they've found it out, as well as explosive devices. There are investigations happening at the moment regarding a trip that these two gentlemen may have recently taken to the Philippines, perhaps to meet with other ISIS-inspired people. And it seems like somehow this is linked, and obviously we need to wait for more information, but it would be pretty hard not to assume that this isn't linked somehow with what has been happening in Gaza for the last couple of years and the absolutely abhorrent, you know, war on the Gazan Palestinian people by the Israelis. Now, I want to say this right out of the gate. That does not justify this, because the people who were on that fucking beach were not Israeli as far as we know. They were not in Israel. They're not part of the IDF. They're not committing acts against these people. They just happen to share the same religion as the people who are committing these abhorrent acts in that part of the world. And via this guilt by association, they've been identified as innocent people who were probably Jewish. And bear in mind, a lot of people that were killed at the end of this were not just Jewish, by the way. A variety of different Australian people died at the hands of these two animals. Now, the part that is insane to me, because I asked the question, you know, how did someone get so many guns to pull this off in this country? Because our gun laws are very strict and very strong. We have single bolt action rifles are allowed. You are allowed to have shotguns. You're allowed to have some pistols to a certain extent, but they have to be kept in safes. You have to have very regular inspections. You have to declare these weapons. So how did this person get so many? And who were they? And this is, I guess, where the shocking part of the behind the scenes, beyond the shocking, abhorrent nature of what happened, really starts to go, how the fuck did this happen? So not only did this family come to Australia on a student visa in 1998 and was holding a resident return visa this entire time, worked as someone who sold fruit and vegetables here in this country, apparently since then, I guess, and had guns for recreational hunting, which is fine. It is legal in Australia. And I guess, you know, to an extent, maybe that's okay. You know, they weren't committing any crimes up until that point. Until we start to see things like this, which I think does need to lead to some more strict on our even stricter gun controls be implemented. Because it turns out that ASIO, who is our security and intelligence organization in Australia. So if you're an American, I guess it's equivalent to your CIA, I guess. I don't really know much about it. These people came on their flag in 2019 as possibly linked with ISIS. And if you look at the reporting here from the Sydney Morning Herald, that there was a 6-month probe into these people that warranted no further action against them. And that's understandable. If they'd committed no crimes and there was nothing there, then sure. But maybe if someone is out there enough that they're identifying and have links or even suspicions that they might be involved in an international terror organization, maybe we don't let that person have any fucking guns. Maybe that's a good idea. And no matter what happens after this, right? And I know that there is some criticism of the Australian police force who was in attendance that day. There is a lot of reports that it took them a hell of a lot of time to take this guy down, that it ended up being civilians that ended up stepping in at various intervals. But I'm sure it was a nightmare situation. And, you know, what would any of us do in this situation? I guess you never really know until you've been tested like some of these people. But I think there needs to be questions asked that if these individuals were looked at in 2019 by a security agency in this country, who they knew had 6 weapons, who they knew had terrorist ideology links, even though they couldn't prove anything substantial, even though they say there was no evidence or no intel that an attack might have been coming, maybe you need to ask some questions about, did we fuck that investigation up? Why did we let someone like this continue to have guns? If someone is out there and is vocal and is in support of a violent terrorist organization like Islamic State, maybe don't let them have any fucking guns. It is a ridiculous thing that this fact has come out. Now there are this trip to the Philippines, and I'm sure we're going to see the investigation from here, and maybe more arrests will take place. There's footage and reports coming out now that when they've visited the home of these people, they've found explosive devices, perhaps in the vehicle as well. Obviously, we need to wait for more reporting to come out to confirm on that, because there is so much confusion and conjecture right now, because everyone is understandably furious and terrified, and, you know, they want answers more than anything. But it certainly does seem like some questions need to be asked about how do we investigate this person and let them keep these weapons in the way that we did. It is a ridiculous thing that this has been able to happen. So we've got some insights as to who these people are, right? We have some insights into what they've done. And to be honest, there's a lot of footage that I wish I could show right now, but I don't want to go and piss off YouTube in my early days back on the platform by showing things that are obviously very graphic and confronting. And let's be real, if you haven't seen it on Twitter already, you're going to see it whether you want to or not in the next little while, because this news is everywhere. But I think we need to talk about the people on the ground, because we have these incredible tales of heroism in the light of something so horrible that makes you know that even in our darkest moments, that the light of humanity is still out there. That people from a variety of backgrounds, races, nationalities, and religions bound together to stop 2 absolute evil scumbags. They were brought down, and now we're going to hope that justice comes next. But what is infuriating to sit back and watch as an Australian, right, as a human being, is watching the way that how desperately quickly all of these political commentators And all of these politicians have been desperate to leverage what has happened to these people that are injured, that have been shot, that have been killed, and turn it into a political weapon, or to try and use it as a political shield, to try and win a point and go, ha, I told you so. And there is no greater example of this than our good friend Benjamin Netanyahu, right? Much like he did after the death of Charlie Kirk, the first thing this guy has done is to come out and ignore the sources here on Twitter, because I've just looked for the easiest video to find. There are so many versions of this. God, I hope it's real. Who knows in the AI era? But I've seen this widely reported enough, even on mainstream media, that I'm believing that it's true for now. The first thing he wanted to do was two things. Number one is to say that anything that good that came out of this was because of the Jewish people. And let's listen to what he had to say. So to translate this, he's saying that while we saw the worst of humanity here, we also saw Jewish heroism at its best. And then he saw a video of a Jewish person who pounces on one of the murderers and takes his weapon. So he immediately wanted to come out and make the point that it is Muslim people that did this. And unfortunately, it does look like that is true, that the religious faith of the people who committed this atrocious crime happened to be Muslim. And he wanted, because the victims were Jewish, so badly to be able to defend his position and further the claim that any criticism against Israel in the last couple of years is anti-Semitic. He wanted to come out and say, well, look, the hero that stopped all this was Jewish. But fun fact, the guy in that video, and please watch that video if you've got a stomach, don't watch it in front of the kids. The guy who tried to stop this shooter very heroically, very famously, and it turns out there is more than one hero, we'll come back to that in a moment, is a guy called Almad Al-Ahmed. And there is footage of him this morning praising Allah for his survival and thankful that so many less people were hurt than could have been, and praying for the people who were shot and killed. A Muslim guy. A Muslim guy. So not only were the worst people on the beach this week of the Muslim faith, one of the best human beings on the planet on that beach this week was the Muslim guy. The Muslim part shouldn't matter, right? There are piece of shit humans, and there are heroes that were tested like this guy who have risen up in ways that I don't think many of us would. I truly wonder if I was put in that situation where I would hide behind that car and shit my dacks. I honestly don't know if I could do what that man did, where he sprinted and crash tackled a guy with a gun and he got shot in the process. He is very lucky to be alive. And rather than just celebrate this man for who he is, we had to go out of their way, Mr. Netanyahu, and try and say, well, this is a Jewish hero, right? Everything evil that was done that day was because of the Muslims. Everything heroic that was done that day was because of the Jews. Now, there was a lot of heroic acts that day by police, by civilians, by Jewish people, by Muslim people, by everyday Australians. There is some more footage this morning that is really confronting to watch, that a car pulled over and actually tried to stop one of the shooters, a couple. And unfortunately, it looks like one or maybe both of those people have lost their lives as well. I hope their names come out soon, and they deserve every recognition for trying to intervene and stop this horrible thing from happening. And I swear to God, if these three people and other people who stood up to try and defend the lives on the beach that day are not Australians of the Year next month, and some corporate dickhead or politician douchebag wins it, I will fucking lose my mind. Because the heroes that were there this week need to be recognized. And they are the best amongst us, the people who did that, right? People they didn't know in some cases, right? Just saw a guy shooting other people, right? This Ahmed Al-Ahmed guy apparently ran across the road from, I think he might run a tobacconist store or something, like a smoke shop, comes out and just drops the guy, right? He didn't care who they were. He didn't question whether they were Muslim or Jew, right? He saw Muslim men shooting people, and he, as a Muslim man, tackled them, tried to stop them from killing anyone else, because he's a good human. The religious part doesn't matter. It shouldn't matter. This is a great guy. Those people who did this, horrible, horrible excuses for human beings. Dogs, less than dogs. I hope that the one that lived gets put down. I really do. I really, really do. Because that piece of shit should not deserve to live. And he gets everything that is coming to him after this is done. But what has really infuriated me here, and I saw this coming, the second that this happened, I got pissed off. Because I knew that the first thing we were going to hear after this was we were going to see a response from Benjamin Netanyahu blaming what happened on the Australian people. Blaming the Australian people and our intolerance of what has been going on in Gaza over the last few years and what has been happening to innocent people there and the absolute genocide that is occurring. And we've been vocal about that. And I know Australians have had mixed feelings about this. There are some people who are on one side of the political spectrum and many others not. But we have, as a country, said that the deaths of innocent people are not acceptable. And because of that, we have been attacked, and our leadership, and don't get me wrong, the leadership of Australia sucks. I think both of our major political parties are awful, slightly corrupt human beings that care about their political points than the average lives of Australians every single day of the week. I think they're scum. And I think we need a massive political overhaul in this country. So I'm not a fan of them. I'm not defending them because I like them. I'm defending them because what we're seeing now is weaponization of these people's deaths so that the guy that you see on your screen can make a point. Because he's been saying for a while that this free speech in Australia is a bit troublesome for Israel. You see, when people come out and call out what they're doing over there with, the mass murder and the genocide and what have you, that we are furthering anti-Semitic speech. And we're seeing this all around the world, that anyone who is critical of Israel as a nation, not the Jewish faith, not the Jewish people, not Jewish people in any other countries on planet Earth, but the actions of the Israeli government and the actions of the IDF, the Israeli Defense Force, and what they are doing collectively to the people of Gaza and the people of Palestine. That if you vocalize that, it's anti-Semitic. Anyone who says anything negative about this country, not faith, country, is labeled as a bigot, as someone who is full of hatred. And they've been doing that in Australia for a little while, right? Now, what really, really sucks beyond the horrible loss of human life is that these two pieces of shit have now, I promise you this will happen, have now grabbed some people who were on the fence about the whole Israel-Palestine thing and who are very quick to, question people of different faiths in our country or different immigrants in our country. We're going to see that kind of political discussion skyrocket. In some ways, maybe it should. If we do have people that are supporting these things coming into our country, then maybe we do need to have some limits on what those people can do when they're here, or whether we do allow them in the first place. There is some legitimacy to asking that question now, especially with what we've seen from the ASIO reporting that these people were on a radar. But what really pisses me off is that now there are people who are going to go, oh, maybe these guys are the bad guys. Maybe they deserve this now because of the actions of two humans. Not all the other Muslims, right? In the same way that not every Jewish person around the world is responsible for the crimes of Israel, not every Muslim person in Australia and around the world is responsible for what these two psychopaths did. It is not their crimes. It is not guilt by association, guilt by shared faith. That's not how it works. But that is exactly what has been trying to be done for quite a while now in the political landscape, both here, America, and worldwide, by the spin doctors of the Israeli state. But ultimately, they're doing it here in Australia now, because the first thing that Bibi did after claiming that all the heroes in this situation were Jewish only was to come out and say, ultimately, that this is the fault of the Australian people and Anthony Albanese, because we have tolerated this rise in what he calls as anti-Semitism. When what he really means is anti-Israeli sentiment. Now, why is that anti-Israeli sentiment building? It's a good question. What could it be? Could it be your actions over the last few years? Now, again, This is not justifying what these people did. And it doesn't really matter if that was what they've come out and said as why they did it. It is a dumb thing because none of those people did anything to the people of Palestine or Gaza. None of these people are committing those crimes. And all they have done is further the cause of anyone who was on the fence or who was already on that side of the political landscape of saying, well, you know, some of these Muslim countries deserve this, which is a ridiculous thing to say because we're going back to, again, some of the Islamophobia that was promoted very heavily after 9/11 and other, you know, major events in the 2000s and 2010s. It's a crazy situation. And I think it's just so horrendously disgusting that this man tries to capitalize on every tragedy around the world, whether it be the death of Charlie Kirk recently, where the first thing he did after that death was come out and say, this guy hated everything that's being said about the Jews at the moment. Everything that's being said about Israel. He's a great defender and you should be mad about this and it is Muslim people's fault. Tried to make it sound like it was, linked with the far left progressives and Muslim culture. And now he's going to come out and do exactly the same thing. And he's trying to use our country to do this. This guy does not get to control the free speech of other nations. We have seen the very heavily influenced effect that they've had via AIPAC in America and their funding organizations that allow them to heavily influence and effectively buy off mouthpieces and politicians in America. And now we're seeing them try to use this same thing of trying to paint everyday Australians who love their Jewish neighbors, who love their Muslim neighbors, who love their Christian neighbors. Do you know why? Because we don't really give a shit about your background for the most part. I genuinely believe that. Most Australians don't give a shit about your background. All right? If you try and shove it down our throat, yeah, we might have a bit of a problem with it. There are some Aussies that do, and most of them are obviously of a very strong Christian background. But I've got my own things about religion of why I think that it is something that has led to the most division on the planet. And I think that most of our politicians, to be honest, if we really want someone truly independent to lead us, should be agnostic or atheist. Because, you know, you are going to be motivated to defend your own based on your own faith belief system, and you are not going to be able to represent the ideas and the thoughts of others. But this guy, right, Benjamin Netanyahu or anyone in Israel or any other country should not get to control the way that we talk in our country. We should not have to limit our ability to question terrible things that are happening around in the world and limit our free speech and curtail our right to talk about these things and have our own feelings and opinions and not be labeled bigots for doing so. Because I think most people asking these questions and most people feeling and seeing the footage that they've been on Twitter and Instagram and everywhere around the planet where you've seen everyday humans absolutely destroyed by drones and bombs and guns that have had no ability to defend themselves. People are going to have questions. People are going to have strong feelings about it, and rightly so, because it is the worst thing that has happened in living memory, right? Going back, obviously, until the 1940s, which is obviously the last time something like this happened. It is so disgusting that we're in this point. And unfortunately, it is this political landscape. And it is all of this, right? I think everyone that saw the escalation happen over the last couple of years, what the really terrifying thing is, we're going to see more of what we saw in Australia this week. Maybe not here, maybe here, but we're definitely going to see it worldwide. We are definitely going to see more attacks, terrorist attacks by people who have been radicalized from that part of the world, who have felt marginalized because of what's happened and the injustice behind it. And that when you kill, you know, generations of people and you have these young ones grow up who have seen nothing but the oppression of one particular people against another particular kind of people, I think, unfortunately, we are going to see more things like this, and we have to be vigilant. We have to do everything we can to make sure that nothing like this hopefully can happen. But I think the motivation to do so is going to be there because of what's been happening in that part of the world for the last little while. And look at, again, even me having this conversation to myself or with you guys right now feels gross in a way, because I'm talking about these same political talking points right now, where I guess all I'm trying to do is verbalize that I don't understand, you know, how we're sort of getting to this point. The way that I was raised with the rights and the wrongs and the good and the bads and the evil. The modern era is confusing as shit for someone as me who was raised on a binary good and evil. That there is black and there is white. And yes, there is an operating gray, but that gray seems to be taken over a hell of a lot. And watching the way that people can pretzel themselves morally to back some of the worst things in the world that have happened, right? Like these shootings today. Anyone that comes out that says this is a good thing, I hope bad things happen to you. Because there is nothing good that came out of today. This week. There is nothing good that what comes out of this attack on Bondi Beach. Everything about this is horrible. If it means that we lead to investigations about how we can perhaps stop the wrong people having guns in this country, people who intend to do harm to other humans, right? If we do see that there are people who have a history of violence or who have a history of trauma that are coming in from other countries, or even in our own country, right? People who have, various mental health challenges or issues or traumatic past or violence, maybe we do need to have more stricter gun controls on those people as well. Like maybe there could be somewhere down the road some sliver of hope that comes back to this. Maybe people go into Christmas and the end of year here in Australia and they start to look around their family and go, oh my God, what if it was my family? What if we were on the beach that day at Christmas and this happened to us? God forbid, maybe people hug their kids a little bit tighter. Maybe people kiss their wife a little bit longer, one more time, because they just think about the importance of family and love and life and all the things that we should be paying way more attention to instead of all this truffle and bullshit like what you're watching right now with some dickhead talking on YouTube. Maybe something good comes out of it, but it's hard to see that at this point because this is a horrible event. And I think that we've seen some of the worst humanity this week. And I think we're going to continue to hear from some of the worst humanity this week with politicians and political talking moron heads and people trying to make a point. But I think, we have seen some of the best, these heroes, the police that stood up, the civilians that stood up. Ahmed Al-Ahmed, mate, what a legend. What a fucking legend. If that guy is not Australian of the Year, I will personally riot, right? I'll fly to Canberra, and no one wants to go to Canberra. It's a genuine shithole. The only thing that place is good for is fireworks, cocaine, and hookers. Allegedly, I wouldn't know anything about any of those three, of course. But it's, that guy deserves some kind of recognition because what a dude. What a dude to come out and just risk your own life to protect complete strangers. And I think my favorite part about this, the part that just shows you that so much of this is bullshit nonsense, right? All this religion crap, all this political crap, is that a guy of the same faith as these terrorists is the one who tried to stop them because it didn't matter to him. Life was more important. Didn't matter which lives, life was more important. And I think we can learn a lot from this guy. So look, it's a confusing situation. I'm so fucking angry and confused and upset, as I'm sure many other Australians and maybe non-Australians are as well. So look, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop it in the comments. Send me a message. I hope you guys are all doing okay. I hope you have a great week, and I will talk to you soon. Cheers.